Idaho, 1921. The Sawtooth Mountains, a place where winter didn't visit. It moved in, stayed, killed what it could. Snow piled up to the windowsills. Temperatures dropped until spit froze before it hit the ground. The wind cut through gaps in cabin walls like knives through paper. And in a cabin tucked into the pines, Samuel McKenzie had built something that looked like madness welded to stupidity. 3 rusty buckets, stacked at odd angles. Holes punched through the metal, rocks and sand packed inside. A stovepipe jutting out the side like an afterthought. It sat in the corner of his cabin like a sculpture, made by a man who'd never seen a stove, but had one described to him by a drunk. Every other trapper in these mountains had a proper cast iron stove. $30 to $60, heavy, reliable. The kind of thing a man could trust when the temperature dropped to hell and kept falling. Sam had spent $1.50 on buckets at the general store. Everything else was salvaged, gathered, scrounged from trash heaps and riverbeds. "That's not a stove," said William Bradford, a fellow trapper whose cabin stood 2 miles downriver. He stared at Sam's contraption with the look of a man watching someone dig their own grave. "That's 3 buckets. Buckets don't heat cabins. You've lost your mind, Sam." Sam didn't look up. He was packing small stones into the bottom bucket, arranging them in a specific pattern around a central fire chamber he'd fashioned from a tin can. "This will heat better than your $60 cast iron stove," Sam said calmly. "And it'll burn 1 load of wood for 9 hours without reloading." 9 hours. William repeated it like a curse word. "Sam, no stove burns for 9 hours on 1 load. Not even the best stoves do that, and yours is made from buckets. Buckets with holes cut in them. This is the craziest thing I've seen. And I once watched a man try to train a wolverine. The holes are important. They create airflow, controlled airflow. The fire doesn't burn fast and hot like a regular stove. It burns slow, complete. Every bit of the wood turns to heat. Nothing wasted. Controlled airflow through bucket holes." William shook his head slowly. "Sam, listen to yourself. You're describing a trash fire with pretensions. When the cold hits, you're going to realize that scrap metal can't heat a cabin. You'll freeze. And I'll have to drag your frozen body down to town come spring. I won't freeze. I'll be warmer than you, using 1/4 of the wood you burn, and this bucket stove will run all night on a single load. I'll sleep through the night without tending the fire once." William laughed. Not cruel, but with the certainty of a man who knew how reality worked. You can't sleep through the night without tending the fire. No one can. The fire goes out. The cabin gets cold. You wake up, reload, go back to sleep. That's how winter works in the mountains. You can't change that with buckets. Watch me." The other trappers who saw Sam's bucket stove had similar reactions. The consensus was clear. Sam had built an absurd contraption that might provide minimal heat for a short time, but would never serve as a serious heating system. Some thought he was experimenting, trying something creative that wouldn't work but would teach him lessons. Others thought he was being cheap, unwilling to spend money on a proper stove, too stubborn to admit he needed what everyone else had. A few thought he'd genuinely lost touch with reality after too many winters alone in the mountains. Isolation did that to some men, made them think crazy ideas were brilliant, made them see genius where there was only madness. Sam ignored all of it. He'd spent the previous winter in a rented cabin in town, working at the sawmill to save money for his homestead. He'd studied every stove in town, talked to the blacksmith about combustion, read everything he could find about fire and heat, and he'd realize something. Conventional stoves were fundamentally inefficient. They burned wood too fast. Most of the heat went up the chimney. The fire had to be constantly fed. It was wasteful, brutally, stupidly wasteful. There had to be a better way. The answer came from multiple sources. He'd read about gasification, about how wood doesn't actually burn. The wood heats up and releases gases. The gases burn. If you could control the release of those gases and ensure complete combustion, you could extract far more heat from the same amount of wood. He learned about rocket stoves from a traveling missionary who'd worked in China. Simple designs that burned tiny amounts of fuel, very hot and very clean. And he'd talked to an old prospector who described how blacksmiths controlled their forge fires with careful air regulation. More air wasn't always better. The right amount of air in the right place created optimal combustion. Sam combined all this knowledge into his bucket stove design. The bottom bucket was the largest, 5 gallons. He'd punched holes around the bottom edge, small holes, 1/4-inch diameter, 10 of them evenly spaced. These holes allowed primary air to enter. The air flowed in, hit the hot rocks and fire chamber, and preheated before reaching the burning wood. Inside this bucket, he'd placed rocks. Fist-sized river rocks packed around a central cylinder made from a large tin can with the top and bottom removed. This central cylinder was the combustion chamber, 4 inches in diameter. The rocks served multiple purposes. They absorbed heat during combustion. They radiated heat after combustion stopped. They created thermal mass, and they forced the incoming air to flow in specific patterns. The second bucket sat on top of the first. Sam had removed the bottom entirely and most of the top, leaving just a rim. This created a chamber surrounding the combustion cylinder. Hot gases rising from the fire would enter this chamber. The gases would swirl around, contacting the walls of the bucket, transferring heat. Then the gases would exit through the stovepipe connections Sam had added to the side. The third bucket was the strangest. Sam had filled it with sand, dry sand from the river. He'd placed this sand-filled bucket on top of the second bucket. The hot gases from the combustion chamber would heat the bottom of this bucket. The sand inside would absorb that heat and store it. The sand bucket was essentially a heat battery. 50 pounds of thermal mass. Heating this sand would store significant energy. The stovepipe connection was deliberately small, 3-inch diameter instead of the standard 6 to 8 inches. This restriction created back pressure. The gases couldn't escape quickly. They had to linger in the system, giving up their heat before exiting. The entire assembly stood about 3 feet tall. 3 buckets stacked with rocks and sand, adding mass and thermal capacity. It looked absurd. It looked like something a child might build while playing pretend. But Sam had done the calculations. The design should work. The first test came on November 8th, 1921. Sam loaded the combustion chamber with small pieces of very dry pine, not logs, small sticks, each piece no thicker than his thumb. He packed them tightly, standing vertical in the combustion cylinder. He lit the top. The fire started slowly. Flames crept down through the vertical wood. The primary air holes at the bottom fed oxygen to the base of the fire. As the wood heated, it released gases. These gases rose through the burning zone and ignited. The combustion was intense but localized. Only the area where oxygen, fuel gases, and heat met was actually burning. The rest of the wood was being dried and gasified by the heat. As the fire consumed wood at the bottom, more wood above descended and began gasifying. It was a self-feeding process. Once started, it would continue until all the wood was consumed. Sam monitored the process carefully. The First bucket grew hot. The rocks inside heated up. The second bucket, the chamber where gases swirled, grew very hot. The sand bucket on top warmed gradually. After 30 minutes, the entire assembly was warm to the touch. Not dangerously hot, but definitely warm. The cabin temperature began rising, 50 degrees, 55, 60, 65. Within 1 hour of lighting the fire, the cabin was comfortable. And Sam hadn't added any wood. The original load was still burning. He checked the combustion chamber. The wood level had dropped maybe 2 inches. The fire was burning very slowly. After 3 hours, the cabin was 70 degrees. The bucket stove was radiating heat steadily. Sam checked the wood level, down about 6 inches. The original load was perhaps 1/3 consumed. The burn rate was extraordinarily slow. After 6 hours, the cabin was still 68 degrees. The wood was 2/3 gone. Sam estimated he had another 3 hours of burn time remaining. After 9 hours, the fire finally burned down to coals. The cabin temperature was 65 degrees. 9 hours of steady heat from a single load of wood. Sam hadn't added fuel once. The bucket stove had burned slowly, completely, efficiently. William Bradford visited the next day. "How was your first night with the bucket stove?" "Warm. I fired it at 6 p.m. Went to bed at 10. Woke at 7 a.m. The stove was still warm. The cabin never dropped below 60. I didn't tend the fire once during the night." "You're telling me you slept through the night without reloading?" "Yes. That's impossible. No fire burns that long. This one does. Want to see it tonight? Come watch." William agreed. He arrived at Sam's cabin at 5 p.m. Sam loaded the bucket stove. Small sticks of pine packed vertically. He lit the top. The fire started. William watched skeptically, arms crossed, jaw set, ready to say, "I told you so." After 1 hour, the cabin was warm. William checked his pocket thermometer, 68 degrees. After 2 hours, 70 degrees. The fire was still burning on the original load. After 3 hours, still burning, still heating. William was amazed. "How is it still going? Where's the wood coming from?" "The same wood I loaded 3 hours ago. It burns very slowly, maybe 1 inch per hour. I loaded 18 inches of wood. That's 18 hours of burn time, theoretically. In practice, about 9 hours until the coals need reloading. This shouldn't be possible. It's possible because of the design. The fire burns from the top down. The airflow is carefully controlled through those small holes at the bottom. The wood below the active burn zone is being dried and gasified by the heat. As the fire consumes wood at the burning zone, more wood feeds into it from above. The process is continuous and very slow, like a candle burning down, not a log fire burning up. William stayed until 8 p.m. The fire was still burning strong. The cabin was comfortable. He left shaking his head in disbelief. The skeptic had seen something he couldn't explain. Over the next 2 weeks, Sam refined his operation. He learned the optimal wood size. Thumb-thick sticks worked best. Thicker wood took too long to gasify. Thinner wood burned too fast. He learned the optimal packing. Tight enough for slow burning, loose enough for gases to escape. He learned that very dry wood was essential. Wet or green wood wouldn't gasify properly. By late November, Sam had the system perfected. 1 load in the evening before bed. The fire burned for 9 to 10 hours. The cabin stayed warm all night. He slept through without tending the fire. His wood consumption was approximately 1 cord per month. William was burning 4 cords per month in his conventional stove. Sam was using 1/4 the wood and sleeping better. No middle-of-the-night fire tending. Just continuous warmth from his bucket stove. December brought real cold. Temperatures dropped to 0 and below. The kind of cold that made trees crack and explode in the night. the kind of cold that froze the breath in your nostrils. This was the true test. William's cast iron stove burned constantly. He fed it every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. His cabin stayed at 55 to 60 degrees. Sam fired his bucket stove twice daily. Morning and evening, each load burned for 9 to 10 hours. The overlap meant continuous heat. His cabin stayed at 65 to 70 degrees consistently. On December 21st, the temperature hit minus 25 degrees, the coldest night of the year, the kind of night that killed men who weren't ready. Sam fired his bucket stove at 7 p.m. Large load, tightly packed. He went to bed at 10. The cabin was 72 degrees. He woke at 7 a.m. The cabin was 64 degrees. The fire had burned out around 3 a.m., but the thermal mass of the rocks and sand had continued radiating heat for 4 more hours. 8 degrees of temperature drop over 4 hours with no active fire. That's only 2 degrees per hour. The thermal mass was doing exactly what Sam had designed it to do. William came to check on Sam later that morning. He'd been up all night tending his fire. He was exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. The look of a man being slowly ground down by winter. You sleep through the night? Every night? 1 fire before bed? Burns for 9 hours. Thermal mass keeps the cabin warm for several more hours after that. I wake up comfortable. No night work. How about you? I was up every 2 hours. My stove burns through wood so fast I can't sleep. I'm exhausted. And I'm burning 4 times the wood you are. Want me to help you build a bucket stove? Yes. Immediately. I need sleep. And I'm running out of wood at this rate. The story of Sam's bucket stove spread quickly through the mountain trapping community. The device that looked insane but burned for 9 straight hours. That let a man sleep through the night without tending fire. That used 1/4 the wood of conventional stoves. People wanted to know how. They wanted to see it. They wanted to build their own. Sam welcomed visitors throughout January 1922. He showed them the design, explained the principles. Top-down burning, controlled airflow, gasification, thermal mass. Not everyone understood the theory, but everyone understood the results. 9 hours of burn time, 1/4 the wood consumption, sleeping through the night. These were tangible benefits that every mountain man valued. By February, 7 trappers had built bucket stoves based on Sam's design. The results were consistent. All achieved burn times of 8 to 10 hours. All reduced wood consumption by 60 to 75%. All allowed sleeping through the night without fire tending. The validation was complete. The physics of Sam's bucket stove involved several principles working together. First, top-down burning versus bottom-up burning. In a conventional stove, you light the fire at the bottom of the wood pile. The fire burns upward. As it burns, it heats the wood above, driving off moisture and gases. These gases rise and often escape, unburned up the chimney. This is inefficient. Much of the wood's energy is lost as unburned gases. Sam's bucket stove burned from the top down. You lit the wood at the top. The fire burned downward. As it burned, it heated the wood below, driving off moisture and gases. But these gases had to rise through the active burn zone to escape. As they passed through the flames, they ignited and burned. Very little escaped unburned. The efficiency gain was substantial. Top-down burning ensured nearly complete combustion. Second, controlled air supply. Conventional stoves have large air intakes. You open the door or damper and air rushes in. More air means faster burning. Faster burning means more heat, but also means you burn through wood quickly. Sam's bucket stove had very restricted air intake, just 10 quarter-inch holes. The total air intake area was about half a square inch. For comparison, a conventional stove might have 10 square inches of intake area, 20 times more. With restricted air, the fire couldn't burn fast even if it wanted to. The combustion rate was limited by oxygen availability. This forced slow, steady burning. The wood lasted much longer. Third, gasification and secondary combustion. Wood doesn't actually burn. Wood heats up and releases volatile gases. These gases burn. In a conventional stove, the wood sits in the fire and releases gases. Some gases burn immediately. Others escape up the chimney. In Sam's design, the wood below the active burn zone was heated by the fire above. This heating drove off gases. The gases rose through the active burn zone where they encountered heat and oxygen. They ignited in secondary combustion. This captured energy that would normally be lost. The gasification process was continuous. As the fire consumed wood, more wood below was gasified. The cycle continued until all wood was consumed. Fourth, thermal mass storage. The rocks in the bottom bucket and the sand in the top bucket stored heat during active combustion. Perhaps 30 pounds of rocks and 50 pounds of sand, 80 pounds total. Heating this mass by 200 degrees stored approximately 3,200 BTUs. Not enormous, but meaningful. After the fire burned out, this stored heat continued radiating into the cabin for hours. This extended the heating period beyond the active burn time. The thermal mass also stabilized temperature. Instead of the cabin temperature spiking during burning and crashing after, the thermal mass buffered the changes. Temperature stayed more stable. Fifth, heat extraction efficiency. The swirl chamber in the second bucket and the restricted chimney exit forced hot gases to linger in the system. They couldn't escape quickly. As they lingered, they contacted the metal bucket surfaces and transferred heat. The gases cooled before exiting. When Sam checked the stovepipe exit temperature, it was only about 250 degrees. In Williams' conventional stove, exit temperatures were 500 to 600 degrees. That 350-degree difference represented heat that Sam was capturing, but William was losing. The total system efficiency was extraordinary. Sam estimated his bucket stove captured 70 to 80% of the wood's energy as useful heat. A conventional stove captured maybe 30 to 40%. Sam was roughly twice as efficient. This explained the 4-to-1 difference in wood consumption. Double the efficiency means half the fuel for the same heat. But Sam was also sleeping through the night, so his duty cycle was better. He wasn't constantly burning. He burned intermittently but efficiently. The total fuel savings were even greater than the instantaneous efficiency improvement. The comfort factor was also important. In William's cabin, temperature fluctuated wildly. Hot right after loading. Cool before the next load. The swings were 20 to 30 degrees. In Sam's cabin, temperature varied by maybe 8 to 10 degrees over a full cycle. From peak right after firing to minimum just before the next firing. Much more stable. Much more comfortable. The psychological benefit of sleeping through the night was enormous. William was sleep-deprived, constantly waking to tend the fire, constantly worried about the fire going out, constantly exhausted. Sam slept normally, 8 hours uninterrupted, woke refreshed, no night anxiety about heating. The mental health difference was substantial. The construction cost comparison was stark. William's stove, $60. Sam's bucket stove, $1.50 for buckets. Rocks and sand were free, 40 times cheaper. The performance was equal or better. The return on investment was effectively infinite. Sam had created superior performance for 1/40th the cost, through understanding rather than spending. The durability was surprisingly good. Buckets are thin metal. You'd expect them to burn through quickly. But the design protected them. The rocks and sand absorbed most of the heat. The buckets themselves never got hot enough to degrade. Sam's original bucket stove operated for 8 years before needing any repair. At that point, he replaced one bucket that had developed a hole. Cost, 50 cents. Total 8-year cost, $2. William had replaced his cast iron stove once during that period. Cost, $60. Sam's total cost over 8 years was $2. William's was $120, 60 times cheaper. By summer 1922, 15 trappers in the region had bucket stoves. By winter 1922-1923, 30 had them. By 1925, the bucket stove design had spread throughout the Idaho mountains and into Montana. The variations in design showed creativity. Some used different bucket configurations, some added more thermal mass, some optimized for cooking as well as heating, but all followed the same core principles: top-down burning, restricted airflow, gasification, thermal mass. The technology never went commercial. No company manufactured bucket stoves. Why would they? The materials were scrap. The construction was simple. Anyone could build one in a few hours. There was no profit opportunity. But the knowledge spread person to person. Trappers taught other trappers. Mountain men shared the design freely. It became part of the vernacular technology of the Idaho mountains. Sam McKenzie lived in his Idaho cabin until 1949, 28 years. During all that time, he heated with bucket stoves. He built several over the years, refining the design. He never bought a commercial stove. He never needed to. His bucket stoves worked perfectly. In 1949, Sam moved to Boise to live with his nephew's family. He was 73 years old. The mountain winters were getting too hard. But he'd proven his point. You didn't need expensive equipment to stay warm. You needed understanding. When Sam died in Boise in 1956 at age 80, his obituary mentioned his years as a mountain trapper, but didn't mention the bucket stove that had revolutionized heating in the Sawtooth Mountains. The knowledge he'd shared was already fading from memory. By the 1970s, bucket stoves had mostly disappeared. Commercial stoves and propane heaters had taken over. The old trappers who'd used bucket stoves had died or moved away. The knowledge survived only in scattered memories. In the 1990s, the rocket stove movement rediscovered the principles. Engineers and designers studying efficient combustion developed systems remarkably similar to Sam's bucket stove. They called it innovative technology. They published research papers. They held workshops. They were rediscovering what Sam had known 70 years earlier. Today, you can find online communities dedicated to rocket stoves and efficient wood burning. The designs are sophisticated. The materials are modern. But the principles are ancient. Top-down burning, controlled combustion, gasification, thermal mass. Sam understood them in 1921 with nothing but observation and thought. One reference to Sam's bucket stove exists in archived letters. A trapper named Robert Hayes wrote to his brother in Oregon in January 1923 describing the bucket contraption that McKenzie built that burns for 9 hours and lets a man sleep through the night. The letter is held by the Oregon Historical Society. It's a tiny fragment of documentation for a forgotten innovation. The story of Sam's bucket stove teaches several profound lessons. First, the rate of combustion matters more than the capacity. William's stove could burn large amounts of wood. Sam's could only burn small amounts. But Sam's burned slowly and completely. William's burned fast and wastefully. The slow system with complete combustion beat the fast system with incomplete combustion. Rate control through restricted air intake is more important than having a large firebox. Second, combustion efficiency is about chemistry and physics, not materials. Sam's buckets cost almost nothing. William's cast iron stove was expensive and well made, but Sam's design achieved better combustion efficiency. The materials don't determine efficiency. The design determines efficiency. Cheap materials with good design beat expensive materials with poor design. Third, thermal mass extends and stabilizes heating. The rocks and sand in Sam's bucket stove stored heat and released it gradually. This extended heating beyond active combustion and smooth temperature swings. Modern heating systems mostly lack thermal mass. They heat on demand. This is responsive but inefficient and uncomfortable. Adding thermal mass improves any heating system dramatically. Fourth, sleeping through the night is worth more than we calculate. William saved money by using a conventional stove instead of building something custom. But he paid with sleep deprivation, constant night waking, constant vigilance, constant exhaustion. Sam invested a few hours building a bucket stove. He gained normal sleep every night. The return on that small-time investment was enormous. Sleep is valuable. Systems that preserve sleep have hidden worth. Fifth, the best solutions often look absurd until proven. Sam's bucket stove looked ridiculous. 3 rusty buckets stacked with holes cut in them. Everyone mocked it. Everyone predicted failure. But it worked better than anything else. If we dismiss ideas because they look strange, we lose access to many good solutions. Judgment based on appearance rather than performance blinds us to innovation. Sixth, knowledge spreads when it provides obvious benefit. Sam didn't market his bucket stove. He didn't try to profit from it. He just built it and used it. Other people saw it work, saw the 9-hour burn time, saw the fuel savings, saw the comfort. They wanted it. The knowledge spread organically because the benefits were undeniable. Good solutions propagate themselves when people can see them working. The 9-hour burn time from a single load was revolutionary in mountain heating. No conventional stove could match it. The best stoves might burn for 3 to 4 hours. Sam achieved more than double that. The fuel efficiency was equally revolutionary. 75% reduction in wood consumption. For trappers and mountain men, this was transformative. Less time cutting wood meant more time for other activities. Less wood needed meant less labor, less hauling, less splitting, less storage space. The total life improvement was substantial. The economic analysis shows the power of knowledge over capital. Sam spent less than $2 over 8 years on heating equipment. William spent $120. Sam was warm. William was warm. Sam slept through nights. William didn't. Sam's solution was 60 times cheaper and provided superior comfort. Knowledge can substitute for capital. When you understand principles, you can create solutions that cost almost nothing but perform better than expensive products. This is the ultimate return on investment. The social dynamics followed the familiar pattern. Before proof, mockery. Everyone laughed at the bucket stove. Predicted failure. Called Sam crazy. After proof, respect. Everyone wanted to learn from Sam, build their own bucket stoves, benefit from his knowledge. Same person, same device. Only the perception changed when results became undeniable. Innovation requires confidence to persist through mockery until proof arrives. Sam's bucket stove represents a class of solutions we desperately need. Low cost, high performance, simple materials, sophisticated design, accessible to anyone with understanding. These solutions exist in many domains, but we often don't pursue them because we assume expensive equals better. We buy products instead of building solutions. We trust marketing instead of understanding principles. Sam's bucket stove shows the alternative. Understand combustion. Apply the principles. Use whatever materials are available. Create something that works better than anything you could buy. The knowledge is more valuable than any product. Everyone laughed at his insane bucket stove. They said buckets couldn't heat a cabin. They said he'd freeze to death. They said he'd lost his mind. They were wrong about all of it. The bucket stove heated his cabin for 9 straight hours on a single load. It let him sleep through the coldest mountain nights without tending the fire once. It used 1/4 the wood conventional stoves required. It cost less than $2 to build and maintain over 8 years. It proved that 3 rusty buckets, properly designed, outperformed $60 cast iron stoves. Sam was right. The mockers were wrong. And the difference was understanding. Understanding that wood doesn't burn, gases do. Understanding that slow combustion is more efficient than fast combustion. Understanding that thermal mass extends heating. Understanding that design matters more than materials. Knowledge that Sam pieced together from reading, observation, and thought. Knowledge that he applied with scrap materials to create something extraordinary. The laughter stopped. The learning started. And dozens of mountain men got warm nights and restful sleep because one trapper understood physics better than everyone who doubted him. That's how forgotten wisdom returns. One unlikely solution at a time. One proven result at a time. One converted skeptic at a time. Sam's bucket stove kept mountain men warm for decades. Then it was forgotten. Now we're remembering.